It's 1:03 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday, December 2nd. Indiana defeated Maryland 65-53. I'm GregWaddell from Sleepers Media. That's Brian Rauf from Heat Check CBB. We've just recorded Purdue Northwestern recaps and Kansas UConn recaps. And for some sick reason, while my child sleeps and Brian's family sleeps, we're about to do an Indiana Maryland recap past 1 a.m. Man, here's my
This is because we love you, Maryland and Indiana fans, because we would not subject ourselves to this if we did not have to.
Here's my takeaway. Maryland is bad at basketball.
Oh my gosh, dude. It's rough. Like, we talked beforehand about how Jahmir Young is good. We know this. Reese and Scott were good. We expect them to be good because they've proven over the course of the season. They were in that game. And then we said everybody else has stunk. We don't expect them to continue to stink, but everybody else has stunk this season. Everybody else was god awful. Like, there is nothing about Maryland right now outside of Jahmir Young that you feel remotely good about. And that's a problem.
It's weird. I think of all the bad basketball teams I have watched this year, Maryland makes the least sense to me because they were a good basketball team last year. They weren't great, but this was a team that had a pulse in the NCAA tournament against Alabama. That happened. I saw it with my eyes. And I
second round team.
I get they lost Hakeem Hart. I get, like, they shot and missed. They swung for the fences on some big transfers, but like, you return Jahmir Young, you return the front court, you add Deshawn-Harris Smith. This team should be better. And even if they're not better, at minimum, they should be what they were last year. And they're not. They have so clearly taken a large step backwards. And trying to pinpoint it is really difficult because on an individual level, I think every guy that's on this team that was on this team last year, except for Jahmir Young, has gotten worse. And that includes Julian Reese, that includes Dante Scott. And it's hard to call him a guy that's gotten worse. But Deshawn-Harris Smith is so far from what I thought Maryland was getting off the recruiting trail. And it's hard for me to evaluate this any other way than to put a lot of blame on Kevin Willard. I don't understand why this has happened.
There was something I wrote about last year, which is a trend I noticed going back to Willard's days to Seton Hall, which I called the Willard swoon, which from about 2013 on, and I don't have the exact stats up in front of me, but from about 2013 on, his teams would start incredibly hot, then inexplicably go on like 2-6 over the course of a month, seemingly out of nowhere, and then recover and be fine again and be good. But they would always have, every year, always have this like month stretch where they're terrible for no real apparent reason. Part of me wonders if that hit like a month or two early and it just happened to be at the start of the season and they haven't figured it out. But the fact it's at the start of the season with so many new guys you're counting on to play big roles that have not shown any indication they can handle those roles is a concern, right? Like Jahmir Young, and I hate this for Jahmir Young because he is awesome, and I still think has been playing as well as he possibly can, right? And he went to high school in that area at DeMatha. I know it means something to him. But everybody else, if you returned, you got worse. If you were new to the program, you've performed well below expectations, no matter what your role has been. And it's been across the board. And you have to put that on coaching at some point, because either you're not scheming things up correctly or you misidentified everybody on your roster.
Yeah, it's baffling. It really is. And I didn't think much of Kevin Willard. I like the guy. Like I really do. Everything I've seen
Yes.
from him as a person, I like. He's a guy you want to root for a variety of reasons. But when they hired him and ran Mark Turgeon out of town, for lack of a better word, I felt like they hired the same guy they fired. And stylistically different, sure. I thought Willard, of all coaches in the Big Ten last year, I thought he did one of the best jobs in the conference. But it was hard. It was hard for me to step back and say, like, is some of this due to unfamiliarity, where Big Ten teams have such this style of play where everybody knows everybody, and nobody knew Willard. Nobody had scouted Seton Hall before, and I thought he caught a lot of teams by surprise last year. It was good. But for me, mentally, personally, there was reason to believe there's like this step to be taken for Kevin Willard in year 2, where he gets even better now that he's more familiar with these teams. And in reality, it's been the exact opposite. And it hasn't even gotten, like, obviously this is a Big Ten game, but these signs of disaster were here long before this Indiana game, right? Like this is the team we've seen all season long. There hasn't been a pulse at any point this season.
No, I wrote about this in a Rauf report that's up on heatcheckcbv.com a week into the season, where it was like, there's something wrong here. And I assumed it would figure itself out, because a lot of that had to do with there just being poor shooting, guys not playing up to the level we thought they'd play at, but like things don't look right. Well, we're a month into the season now and things still don't look right. And they're still not shooting well. I think they're like 355th nationally in 3-point shooting or something incredibly dumb like that. The Willard thing is interesting, and I know we'll get on to Indiana because Indiana won the game without Xavier Johnson. Hello. We'll talk about them in a second. But I think this matters more to Maryland. I want to talk 2 things about Kevin Willard. The first thing is that, like, he came to Maryland with a reputation for positive development. You look at his Seton Hall tenure, he developed guys. Miles Powell is the epitome of that, right? He came in, he was overweight, but he was skilled. Willard worked with him, had 2 years off the bench, 2 years starting, and became like one of the guys in college basketball. And there were a handful of guys you could point to that Willard did that with. Because of that, and I have some family that are Maryland fans and live in the Maryland area, so they all asked me when they hired Willard, like, okay, what's going on here? I'm like, well, you're to your point, getting another Turgeon from a neutral standpoint, but your highs will be higher and your lows will be lower. You're going to get some more variance, and all Maryland fans really care about are the highs, right? Can you show me that you can hit a certain point?
Yeah.
And he hasn't done that yet there, but we're seeing the low of the lows, right? The alarming part is the development aspect that made him such a good coach at Seton Hall. The identification of talent and the then development of that talent. It's only been a year. It's year 2. There isn't that. Guys got worse. Guys didn't progress, right? Yeah. So that's a concern. The other part of that, this is the second thing I want to talk about with Willard, is that he's a Louisville guy, right?
Ooh, wow. I did not expect that.
And I think it's pretty obvious that job's going to be open at the end of the season. There were some speculation from Louisville beat reporters when Louisville was trailing Bellarmine at halftime for the second straight season that maybe a move would be made after that game. But it's pretty clear that the Louisville job is going to come open. And Willard is a Louisville guy. Has he already checked out?
He's got to get the job, though, right? Like, who's hiring Kevin Willard right now?
Well, Mick Cronin?
I mean,
right? But are you leaving UCLA for Louisville? Right? Like, to me, and this is just my opinion. I think Willard has enough of a track record where if Louisville opened, he could get Louisville. Even if Maryland was terrible this year, it would not feel good. But unless Mick Cronin wanted it, I think Willard is the number 2 guy.
It's not as crazy as I thought it was when I first heard you say it. I haven't thought about it for 1 second. And look, I'm a fan of a conspiracy theory. So honestly, this might make more sense than this entire roster just regressing.
Right. None of it makes sense. So I'm trying to figure out what could possibly make sense. This is dumb and I don't agree with it, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, it is weird. Last thing on Maryland and Indiana fans, I promise we will talk about your Hoosiers. The most confusing thing, or the thing I dislike the most from this Maryland team right now, is that they seem to have gone fully into Deshawn-Harris Smith as the primary point guard. And I hate that. I despise that. This was not the case 2 weeks ago. It's a new thing. It's clearly a Willard tweak. And to me, the only reason you do that is if there's been conversation behind the scenes of, hey, your shot's not here, so we need to put you on the ball and we need to put Jameer off the ball. And to me, if that conversation has actually happened, one, that probably destroyed Deshawn-Harris Smith's confidence. It probably killed it, because now the player I'm watching right now is such a departure from the player that just stepped onto the floor for his college debut in the first game of the season and had an efficient 12 points. Like, it feels like everything is forced. It feels like he's second guessing every time he touches the ball. It feels like he's accepted he's the setup guy for this team when they clearly need him in a bigger role than that. And even worse than that to me is I thought he was wide open 10 plus times in this game for like the extra pass to go to Harris Smith, and no one would throw it to him, because I think they all are just assuming he's a total non-shooter at this point. And if that's what this whole roster has accepted from DHS, who unfortunately I now have to pretty much refer to as damn, he sucks. Like, damn, he apostrophe sucks DHS instead of Deshawn-Harris. That's who he is right now. I don't like it. I don't make the apostrophe rules in this game. But if they're not going to pass the ball to him, that's who he is.
The fact that they won't and look him off, I think, tells you a lot about what's happening behind the scenes. And this may be one of those things where we find out months from now, like, oh, yeah, there was some shit happening behind the scenes, and that explains it. That makes sense. Like, that would make sense. But it's not even just him. Like, none of the bench guys are producing. None of the other role players are producing. Like, it's just everybody's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, DHS forced his way in garbage time to 9 points, 3 rebounds, and an assist tonight. He also had 4 fouls. But, like, look, if he's going to be on the floor for 36 minutes, tied for the team lead with Jameer Young, which is what they need. They need those two guys playing.
See, that's the problem too. There's no depth behind them. Like, they counted on him, on Harris Smith being a guy. They didn't account for the fact, like, maybe he's got to gear up speed and account for that. They're like, no, he's going to be the guy, a guy right away. And he's not. And they have no answers or other solutions. It's just figure it out.
Yeah. But the wrong answer, I'll tell you right now, the answer is not, hey, you're our point guard now, get the ball to Jameer Young. That is not the answer. That's not his strength as a player. It's a disaster. Whatever's happening is a disaster. To end on one tiny little positive note for Maryland, they got wrecked. It was horrible. I'm a body language PhD guy. There was plenty of bad body language from everybody involved this whole game. The final body language moment of this game, as Indiana was dribbling out the clock, 5 seconds after Deshawn-Harris Smith just dribbled into a huge crowd and put up some bullshit that got swatted off of him and rebounded by kel'el. The very lasting image of this game was Deshawn-Harris Smith, hands on his knees, head down. Jameer Young went over and forced him to slap 5 with him. I like that. I like that moment from Jameer Young. A little bit of leadership that tells me this team's not completely cooked dead from a vibe standpoint.
I love Jameer Young. I am so sad for him. He's one of my favorite players in the country.
It can work out. I'm still like, I'm out. I think this team is bad right now. I'm not giving up. As long as Jameer Young is on his roster, I'm not giving up. To the side of the team that won the game, who we just ignored for 15 minutes. Hey, I owe Indiana fans a small apology, less of an apology than I did with Hunter Dickinson in the Kansas video, but I owe a small apology here.
Go check that out, by the way.
Yeah, go watch it. I victory lapped Indiana too early. That's what I will say. I'm not going to admit I was wrong. All offseason, I screamed about how this is at best a bubble team and a team that's going to miss the NCAA tournament. I'm not going to admit I was wrong. I still feel like that's a very possible outcome for this roster. What I am going to admit is that I should not have been victory lapping that it was imminent after game 2 of this season when they struggled. Because here they are playing a bunch of bad basketball, in my opinion, and they're 6-1. Like, I have nothing for that. Like, they could be 4-4 like Maryland is right now. Instead, they're 1-0 in the conference, one game ahead, by the way, of the Purdue Boilermakers in the conference. And somehow, some way, Mike Woodson is getting the results in the scorecard that he needs, even if it's ugly. Kel'el Ware tonight, 18 points, 14 rebounds, 8 for 12 from the floor. He hit a 3. But this is now the second consecutive game that all 3 of their front court monsters, Renaud, Mbako, Ware, have all been good at the same damn time. That changes everything.
That's the important thing. First off, shouts to the state of Indiana for being basketball fun on a Friday night. You brought up the fact that you're probably too early for putting them in the grave and assigning them to bubble status, right? We just spent the first 15 minutes of this podcast talking about how terrible Maryland is. Yes, Indiana won comfortably, but this goes back to the whole, okay, if you beat a terrible team, like, do you learn anything? Because I don't think you do. Like, you take the positive away that the 3 bigs played well together. But to me, this was a game of who needs to panic. And if you're Indiana, you won, so you don't need to panic. That's good. I think Maryland fans do. But not panicking, to me, does not mean, like, now you're fine. Right? I think there are still issues with this team. Shooting and spacing still a horrific issue. I still think turnovers are a horrific issue. Your backcourt play is still a horrific issue. But you could be Maryland.
Okay, I can't believe I'm going to take on this role, but I'm going to do it. I'm more optimistic on Indiana than you by a long shot, I think, after this game. And I get it. Maryland right now looks like the second worst, at best, the second worst team in the league. But here's why I'm optimistic. Number one, I think Kel'el Ware is a bona fide star. I don't think there's any concerns anymore. And I get, like, okay, we got to see what's he going to do against Zach Edey. I don't know. Probably the same thing every player in the country does against Zach Edey. Give up 35 and 15. Like,
except for Northwestern.
Yeah, like, it's gonna. Well, they still gave up 35 and 15, right? Like, it is what it is. So, I have no concerns about Kel'el Ware being productive. Like, people came into this season being like, oh, is he even going to be able to play 32 minutes a game? Is he going to be checked out? Does he just want to get his highlights for his pro career? No, he's locked in, and he's this team's best player. And not only is he this team's best player, I think he's probably the second best center in the Big Ten right now, behind Zach Edey.
You can certainly make that case. Right. And tonight, I think we did see the recipe for Indiana winning and winning consistently in the Big Ten, which is actually utilizing those 3 big guys. Right. Which should have been obvious from the jump. But part of the reason why they struggled was because they felt they could play 2 at a time or 1 at a time. And now part of that was because, some of them, particularly McKenzie, did not play well or appeared ready to play. But they actually won the inside battle in this game, which they had not won really previously. And that, to me, like, it feels like I'm congratulating Indiana on taking a baby step for playing the way they should play. But we did see the recipe for, like, why Indiana can be good is, okay, you have 3 monsters. Like, utilize your 3 monsters, utilize your size. And they did. They won the front court battle, and they handily won a Big Ten game. That's the recipe moving forward.
Yeah, they had 46 rebounds to 30 rebounds from Maryland. This was an Indiana team that was getting out-rebounded in all of their first non-conference games against lesser opponents. And by the
Against
way,
Army, who was
right.
winless and like can't accept a player over 6'5" or some Army restriction like that. Like,
And by the way, Maryland, a team who on paper people would say their strength is their front court, right? Veteran dudes. So like this is not like just an asterisk footnote of a game. Like Indiana kind of punked a team that has a good front court. So here's why I was laughing in the middle of your monologue right there. I'm laughing because I just had the clarity realization that this Indiana team is built for the Big Ten. I've joked about how awful they are and how they're going to finish 12th in the Big Ten and they're bad. No, this team's built for the Big Ten. Like the
if they play this way,
Big Ten.
If they play this way, right? Because that's the thing, is they haven't played this way up until now. And that's been the reason for concern.
Do you know why it's changed?
Because Xavier Johnson was out.
So, okay, we have to go here. I wasn't sure if we were going to go here or not. I had a cagey little tweet. I'm sorry, Indiana fans. I apologize. I had a cagey tweet that said Indiana has now played 3 good halves of basketball this season. It's been their last 3 halves. What was the change agent before those 3 halves? I can point to one thing that happened. There's a guy in street clothes now that wasn't beforehand. And look, I had a back and forth with this player in the summer. He accused me of wishing injury on him, which I didn't do. He then realized that was not what happened, and we kind of had to smooth things over, and we did smooth things over. All is good between Xavier Johnson and I. But I speculated all offseason that this was probably not the smartest move to bank on him being your only guard because he's not durable. And it's okay to speculate something might happen without wishing it. And we made it 7 games before he's in street clothes. That's not me excited that happened. It's just the reality of the situation. And I feel strongly at this point, the Indiana team that we have seen without Xavier Johnson has been significantly better than the one we saw with Xavier Johnson. And I don't know why that is, because Cardio Gabe is not a better player than Xavier Johnson. Cardio Gabe comes out and gets 24 minutes of cardio. He had 0 points, 3 fouls, and 1 rebound tonight. Nice game, Gabe Cups. Like, maybe he'll get there. But like, Xavier Johnson is a better player than the guy that took his spot in the starting lineup. But to me, what has changed is every single possession. There is not one possession that doesn't go through the 3 guys in the front court now. And that's changed everything. It's not a coincidence that all 3 of these guys suddenly look good when Trey Galloway is solely focused on getting them the ball.
And that's the thing, because I think Xavier Johnson is a flawed player. I think he is a good player, a good college player. And I've thought this going back to his days at Pitt. But once he did not make that freshman to sophomore jump, he kind of became the same guy, where he is good at certain things and not good at certain things. And you just kind of have to accept that for the way that it is. He's not a number 1 option. And I think that's fair. But I think sometimes his mindset and his role, because he has the ball in his hands, it's easy for him to say, I got this. And I do think there are times throughout his Indiana career where it has worked out, where he has said, I got this. I think more times than not, it has not worked out. But being the competitor that he is, he thinks of the times where it has worked out, right? Indiana is at its best playing through its strength, which is the fact that you have 3 dominant big guys. This is my biggest complaint with Matt Painter at Purdue, is that he recruits big and doesn't play big. He has 1 big guy, then puts other big guys on the bench, but he recruits big. Mike Woodson recruited big / inherited big. Xavier Johnson's injury has somewhat forced him to actually play big, and it's working. Now, is what works against a team as bad as Maryland is right now something that's going to work throughout January and February and early March? Maybe not. I don't know. But this is, I think, the best Indiana has looked this season. Everything else has been somewhat of a pain. And I think it's not because you're trying to keep Xavier Johnson happy. It's not because Xavier Johnson's on the court, because I think Xavier Johnson, to your point, is a better guard than anybody that they have. But you're playing through your on-paper strength. Mm-hmm. And I think that matters.
Yeah, it 100% does. And again, this is one of the more uncomfortable things that I feel like we're going to have to talk about this college basketball season, because look, I don't like antagonizing a player. And I get that we're kind of blurring the lines of that with me personally and with sleepers and what we do and how we've talked about Xavier Johnson. I don't want that to be the case, but it's also objectively true that Indiana's best three halves of the season have come without Xavier Johnson. And I think they need to find, like, he's going to come back healthy, knock on wood. I pray that happens. I hope it happens. When he does, it should be a boost for this team. And if they can get the three front court guys playing the way they are without him to play with him that way, this team looks totally different than they did in the non-conference. But I just don't think it's a coincidence. Like it's like we had a reset moment for this program. It felt like they had no direction. They had no North Star. Nobody knew what the identity was supposed to be until Xavier Johnson went down, and all of a sudden Trey Galloway is playing point guard. And Trey Galloway is, honestly, give Trey Galloway a ton of credit. He's smart enough to know what he can and cannot do. So when Trey Galloway comes down in a half-court possession, there's 10 seconds on the shot clock. He's not saying clear out, it's me time. He's like, Malik Reneau, where are you? And then Malik Reneau is making the smart pass to kel'el. So it's interesting.
Something I'd love to see, and this just hit me, is, and I'm going to give Mike Woodson a play, and I think something that can be his offense, is give Xavier on the wing a double ball screen with Malik Reneau and McKenzie popping up. They both set him a screen. He comes in the paint. He can either attack, go to the lane, do a floater, pull up. That's more of Xavier's game. It's going that way. You have McKenzie pop out the three-point line to where if the defense sags and he's open, he's there. Renault's running to the rim. If he's open, he's there. kel'el Ware is in the dunker spot, like on the block, to where if the defense helps up, he's open at the rim, you lob it up to him. I think that is like 4 legitimate options that you have to do. And you have to be creative when you have 3 big guys on the court. But like, to me, you run that, you have 4 options, and it's hard for defense to stop all 4, particularly with Trey Galloway, who can knock down the open 3, being your 5th option. Run that.
I like that. I do. I like that. I'm signed up. Coach Rauf, lock me in. I'll just summarize it with this. This was my bold prediction all offseason. I doubled, I tripled, I quadrupled down on it every turn that I could. Said this team was going to miss the tournament. It is what it is. Tonight is the first time that I can confidently, truly, honestly say I see a path to the NCAA tournament for Indiana. I'm not going to say it should happen. I'm not going to say it's more likely to happen than it won't. I still think this is very bubbly right now until we figure out where Xavier Johnson is. But I see it now. I see it. Mbako's playing well. Reneau is playing well. kel'el Ware is playing great. And I need to figure out whether it's kel'el or Khalil, because I hear different things depending on who I'm listening to. But those 3, every single night they step on the floor, unless Zach Edey's on the floor, they got the front court mismatch. They are the better front court every game they will play in Big Ten play. And that can go a long way, as I realized live on this very program tonight. They're built for the Big Ten, and that terrifies me because I'm probably going to be wrong on my prediction that you'll make the NIT. All right, Brian Rauf, anything you want to summarize here? Any final words?
I see the path forward. I still think they're a bubble team. Like, as I think you should feel better as an Indiana fan than you did before this game started. I don't know how much weight we should put into beating this Maryland team in its current form.
Totally fair. 100% fair. And Ben Higgins from The Bachelor, if you're watching this, we'll see you in the Indiana locker room later this season. Hoosiers, congrats on your win. Terrapins, get your shit together, please, for the love of God. We'll be back. We do previews and recaps every big game of this season. Big is clearly like kind of flexible since we're doing that. It's 1:32 in the morning, and I'm talking about Indiana, Maryland right now. But subscribe to the channel. Brian Rauf will be there with a bunch of other guys from Heat Check CBB. I'm GregWaddell from Sleepers Media, and get some sleep, good people.